For 50 years, Ron Howard seemed perfect. The all-American boy from Mayberry who became Hollywood royalty. But in his latest interview, he revealed the dark hiding behind the smile. The devastating choice he made in 1991 that haunts him still. The family member he almost lost to addiction while he was winning awards. And the moment on set when his body gave out, Ron's confession about what really happened during those missing months will break your heart. Ronald William Howard was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma. And from the moment he opened his eyes, the room already spoke in dialogue. His father, Rance Howard, had adopted Howard as his stage name back in 1948 before joining the Air Force. His mother, Jean Spiegel, trained as an actress and married Rance in 1949 in Winchester, Kentucky. When Ron came along, Rance was still in uniform, balancing military life with screen dreams. And even before Ron learned to talk, he was already on film. At just 18 months old, he made his screen debut in a Western called Frontier Woman, filmed between late 1955 and early 1956. That set wasn't just his first job. It was the start of a life where childhood and camera marks blurred into one. While other toddlers learned to walk, Ron was learning where to stand under the lights. As television moved west, the Howards packed up and left Oklahoma behind. Rance drove the family straight to California, not for sunshine, but for proximity. He wasn't chasing glamour. He was betting everything on being near the new center of TV. Ron was just a toddler, but that move put him next to producers, writers, and sets before he ever saw a school desk. He was already working on Playhouse 90 before grade school, and by the time his brother Clint was born on April 20, 1959, in Burbank, the family's plan was working. Their earnings were managed in-house. No studio guardians, no outsiders. Just a father carefully balancing his own acting roles with being the one-man support crew for his son. Rance took more than 140 film jobs and 177 TV appearances. Not to chase fame, but to stay close to Ron's world and keep things moving. Then came October 3, 1960. Ron was 6. That night, America met Opie Taylor for the first time on the Andy Griffith Show. On paper, he was just another child actor credited as Ronnie Howard. But the connection was different. On set, something deeper happened. Rance didn't just drop his son off, he challenged the writers. After an early read-through, he told the producers the father-son scenes felt fake. Andy Griffith listened. They shook hands on something real. And Andy and Opie's relationship would mirror Ron and Rance's. That handshake built the show's soul. Over the years, Rance even guest-starred 5 times. Staying close, while Ron handled scripts and schedules most grown-ups would buckle under. For 8 seasons through 1968, Ron didn't just grow up. He lived inside a television childhood shaped by love, work, and adult expectations dressed in small-town stories. Their home in Burbank wasn't a star palace. Ron went to regular schools. The family ate meatloaf and fish sticks. Saved money like actors who knew it could all end tomorrow. Scripts piled near the dinner table, but Rance and Jean kept rules. No hired guardians, no chaos. Ron played park league sports when he wasn't memorizing lines. Clint joined the industry too, quietly building a career with over 200 acting credits. They were brothers and co-workers learning early what it meant to punch a clock with cameras. Ron's way of working came from training. Rance taught him how to listen, how to pause, how to respond like a person, not a performer. Producer Sheldon Leonard noticed it. Ron didn't try to be cute, he just told the truth. Even at 6, it showed. His early pay was low, but climbed as the show grew. Fans stopped him in Burbank for autographs. But while his face was on screen, his childhood slipped quietly away. One unforgettable moment came in 1963. Season 4, Episode 1, Opie, the Birdman. 9-year-old Ron filmed the scene where Opie raises orphaned baby birds after accidentally killing their mother. There were no tricks. He just stood there breathing real emotion. Director Bob Sweeney barely needed Andy Griffith called it adult-level timing. Ron used substitution thinking of real sadness, then letting it go after the camera cut. But even with love on set, Ron felt alone. He called those years a golden cage, safe but sealed. He studied in a tiny room near stage 40. A welfare worker stayed nearby, but he didn't have classmates. He did math while Grips rolled dollies. At lunch, he ate with his dad or the prop guy. Andy played guitar. Don Knotts told clean jokes. They tried to make it normal, but Ron missed sandlot sports and bike rides. In 1962, the Music Man brought pressure. He was 8, cast as Winthrop Peru in a big-budget musical. He was tone-deaf with 2 left feet. He panicked during the soft shoe routine, whispering to Shirley Jones, "I can't do it." She calmed him. They shot him from the knees up and dubbed tap sounds later. What looked effortless was a battle won backstage. Shirley noticed the way he directed dolls and reenacted scene signs of the director he'd become. By 1966, he joined the Monroes, filmed in Wyoming's rugged terrain. It lasted only 26 episodes and was canceled in 1967. Ron felt rejected. It stayed with him. In 1968, he turned down an audition for the Brady Bunch because of the family rule. One parent had to be home every day. At 14, he wanted school, friends, normal life. It likely saved his career because by 1974, he became Richie Cunningham on Happy Days. In 1969, he secured residuals from Andy Griffith. Show reruns about $50,000 a year. The family saved it, invested conservatively, even let him lose $25,000 in a go-kart venture to teach him risk. On April 1, 1968, the final Andy Griffith episode aired. Ron was 14. The last week felt heavy. He had lived his entire childhood 48 feet from a camera. Now he had to be a real teenager. In 1974, he walked into Gary Marshall's office and became Richie Cunningham. He won the role, not by acting, but by being real. ABC doubted him, but Marshall insisted. By season 5 in 1977, Ron felt stuck, a 23-year-old playing a frozen teenager while Vietnam raged outside. He begged ABC for realistic stories, even pitched a draft storyline. They refused. He pushed for authenticity wherever he could. That frustration sparked his desire to direct. In 1976, Fonzie was everywhere. ABC wanted to rename the show Fonzie's Happy Days. Ron threatened to walk. Gary Marshall sided with him. ABC compromised. The title stayed. Fonzie got top billing. In October 1977, Ron directed his first episode, A Date with Fonzie. His work was so precise, the crew called him Spielberg. Ratings jumped. ABC gave him more. In 1976, he made the deal with Roger Corman. He'd act in Eat My Dust only if he could direct next. That next was Grand Theft Auto, released in 1977. He co-wrote it with Rance. It cost $602,000 and made $15 million, blowing up cars without permits. Suddenly, no one laughed at the redhead from Mayberry. He married Cheryl Alley in 1975. Henry Winkler was best man. Andy Griffith attended. Cheryl became the stability behind everything. In 1982, he directed Night Shift, starring Henry Winkler and introducing Michael Keaton. It cost $8 million and made $21 million. Then came Splash in 1984, Disney's first touchstone release budget, $8 to $11 million. Gross, $69.8 million. Daryl Hannah swam like a natural. The ending was changed because test audiences hated the sad version. Splash proved Ron could lead the box office. In 1985, he co-founded Imagine Entertainment with Brian Grazer. It grew into a powerhouse with 43 Oscar nominations and nearly 200 Emmys. Imagine Films eventually earned over $15 billion. Then Apollo 13 in 1995 changed everything. Budget, $52 million. Real NASA panels. 10 days of zero-gravity flights. Ron worked 18-hour days for 90 straight days until he collapsed on set from dehydration and hypertension. Production shut down for 36 hours. When he returned, the crew wore mission control shirts. It meant something. Then came his mistake. EDTV, in 1999, an $80 million film that made $50 million. It lost $30 million, and he regretted turning down Castaway. In 2001, he made A Beautiful Mind with meticulous emotional realism. He won the Oscar for Best Director in 2002. Critics attacked omissions in Nash's story, but the film earned $313 million and 4 Oscars. In 2006, he directed The Da Vinci Code with massive church restrictions. They had to digitally recreate interiors. It grossed $758 million. In 2017, his father Rance died, months after his wife Judy. The loss devastated Ron. In 2008, he directed Frost, Nixon, earning 5 Oscar nominations, though the film only made $28.5 million. Ron's marriage to Nancy Morgan, his high school sweetheart, stayed strong through fame, with their no-work talk at dinner rule lasting decades. But he made mistakes. He pushed Bryce into acting too young by directing her school play. He apologized years later. She forgave him. Clint, meanwhile, fell into addiction in the 1980s. By 1990, he hit rock bottom. Ron gave him an ultimatum: rehab, or lose the relationship. Clint chose rehab. Ron later confessed guilt. In 1991, when Jocelyn was born, Ron left for 6 months to film. Far and away, he came home to a newborn who didn't recognize him and a daughter who felt distant. It broke him. He promised never to take long international shoots again. He kept it until 2005, when Cinderella Man forced long reshoots. He missed more of Bryce's life and regretted it deeply. In 2025, for their 50th anniversary, he donated a bench to their high school and quietly admitted to Nancy he still regretted what he missed. In 2020, he directed Hillbilly Elegy, earning a Razzie nomination but also Oscar nods for Glenn Close. He also made Rebuilding Paradise about the 2018 campfire, the hardest project of his career. His mother-in-law lived there. The footage destroyed him emotionally. Then came Eden in 2025, a survival thriller set in the 1930s Galapagos Islands. He had first heard the story 15 years earlier on vacation. He chased realism, not spectacle. The island punished the production. Heat broke equipment. Drones needed special permits. Actors lived in tents. And Ron, at 71, refused special treatment. He collapsed from dehydration again, a quiet echo of Apollo 13, when his wife Nancy arrived. She didn't scold him, she just sat beside him as he drank water slowly, eating wrapped, and Ron felt he had come full circle. When Bryce visited, he asked her if he had missed too much. She squeezed his hand and told him he had missed things but never stopped being there. And then came the 2025 interview, the one the world called his dark truth. He didn't reveal scandal, he revealed regret, fear, love, and the cost of choosing work too often. He admitted he had spent a lifetime telling stories about others because he was afraid to tell his own. And after half a century of perfection, he finally said the words that made people stop. My best stories weren't the ones I filmed. They were the ones I lived in, the ones I almost missed. The interview didn't end where the cameras stopped. When the crew began wrapping cables and dimming lights, Ron stayed in his chair, shoulders rounded, hands folded like a man debating whether to speak or stay silent. The producer whispered, "He's not done," and he wasn't. Ron leaned forward, almost to himself. You know the thing no one tells you about success, it doesn't protect you from the consequences of who you are. He talked about something he had never discussed publicly. The years after A Beautiful Mind, everyone remembers the accolades. Best Picture, Best Director. The applause so loud it drowned out the orchestra. But Ron remembered something else entirely, the silence afterward, the pressure to outdo himself, the feeling that each new film had to prove the last wasn't a fluke. He buried himself in work again. For the first time in decades, he felt the distance growing inside his own home. Clint tried reaching out. Bryce visited him on sets, just to steal an hour of his attention. Nancy watched him chase deadlines like something was chasing him. And he finally admitted on that interview chair that he wasn't proud of that, period. I kept telling myself I was providing, he said, but sometimes, providing becomes hiding. He revealed another moment, one only a few people knew. In 2004, during post-production on The Missing, he was told he had dangerously high blood pressure. He ignored it, worked anyway, pretended the headaches were normal. He laughed bitterly. In the interview, Hollywood rewards you for pretending you're fine. But the turning point wasn't a collapse, it was a phone call. One night, Bryce's voice cracked on the line. She told him she was scared, not of losing him, but of never really having him. It broke him, in a way applause never could fix. That was when Ron realized something he'd never admitted. He had mastered the art of directing stories, but he had forgotten to direct his own life. The confession stunned the producer. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. Brutally, quietly honest. Then Ron spoke about 1991. Again, the choice that haunted him. He said he still replayed it sometimes. Wondered if he could have saved things earlier, stopped Clint from spiraling. Been more present. Being a good man doesn't erase the moments you weren't, he whispered, but then something shifted. A small smile, a kind of peace. He talked about reconciling with Clint, about the night they sat on the hood of an old truck, drinking coffee instead of beer, talking like brothers instead of disappointments. He said it was the closest thing he'd ever felt to redemption. Ron stood to leave, but before he did, he turned back and said one final line, the one the crew would repeat for days afterward. I spent my whole life trying to tell stories that mattered, and somewhere along the way, I forgot that mine did too. And with that, he walked out, slowly, quietly, like a man who had finally put something heavy down. The interview went viral within hours. Clips flooded timelines, not the flashy Hollywood highlights, but the quiet moments. Ron, looking down at his hands, the tremor in his voice, the soft confession of regret. But what the public didn't see was what happened after. He walked out of that room. Nancy was waiting by the studio exit. She didn't ask what he had said, she didn't need to. She simply wrapped her arms around him, a gesture that held 50 years of forgiveness, battles, and the unspoken knowledge that they survived things most couples would never talk about publicly. Was it enough? She whispered. Ron answered, for the first time, I think I told the truth. But the truth has its own momentum. 2 days later, Bryce called. She had watched the interview alone, late at night, long after the kids were asleep. Her voice over the phone was soft, reverent. Dad, I didn't know you carried all that. Ron swallowed hard. I didn't want you to in that moment. They weren't director and actress, industry legacy, and rising star. They were just father and daughter, connected across miles by the shared understanding of all the things families don't say until they finally break open. Then came the message Ron never expected. Clint. A single line, you told them what I couldn't. Ron sat with that for a long time. For decades, he'd tried to protect his brother by staying silent, but silence sometimes becomes another kind of burden. What Clint saw in that interview was not exposure, it was liberation. A recognition that the past didn't have to be a secret to be survived. The documentary crew, sensing the cultural weight of what they'd captured, requested one final shoot, a follow-up. Coda. Ron resisted at first. He didn't want to turn his life into a spectacle. But Nancy convinced him. This isn't about the world seeing you, she said. It's about you seeing yourself. So Ron agreed. The final scene was filmed at dusk, on a quiet hill overlooking Los Angeles. No lighting rigs, no makeup, just Ron, a bench, a single camera, and a sky turning gold behind him. He wasn't asked questions, he just spoke softly, as if narrating his own life from a distance. I always thought legacy was what you leave on film, he said. But legacy, it's the people who forgive you, the people who stay, the people you learn to love better than you used to. He paused, watching the city lights blink awake below. You spend years thinking you're running toward success. Then one day you realize you were running from yourself. A long breath. Then the line the director knew would close the documentary. I'm not proud of every choice I made, but I'm proud. I'm still learning. For a man who's told stories his whole life, I think this is finally the beginning of mine. The camera held on him for a full 15 seconds, a silence so powerful it said more than words could. Then Ron stood, nodded to the crew, and walked off screen, disappearing gently into the fading light. Fade to black. But the story didn't end with that sunset. In fact, that moment, Ron walking into the dimming light, became the spark that set off a reaction far bigger than he expected. When the documentary aired, it wasn't the scandals people latched onto, it was the humanity, the honesty, the admission that even the most gentle, successful people have corners of their past they keep hidden in soft shadows. Celebrities posted their own tributes. Directors wrote long messages about how Ron's words made them rethink the way they treated their families during production. Crew members, the grips, gaff, and assistants who had worked with him over 40 years, shared stories online, how he carried cases when he didn't need to, how he checked on people, quietly, without cameras, how he remembered every name. Ron read none of it. He refused to watch the final cut of the documentary. Nancy did. Bryce did. Clint did. But Ron said, I lived it. That's enough. Yet something unexpected began happening. For decades, Ron was seen as wholesome, steady, predictable, someone with no rough edges. But after the documentary, people saw him differently. Not as a myth, but as a man who had stumbled, forgiven, learned, and kept going. And ironically, that made him more beloved than ever before. Studios flooded his agent with offers, stories about redemption, survival, fractured families, second chances. But Ron turned most of them down. He wasn't chasing prestige anymore. He wasn't chasing anything. Instead, he made a small decision, one so quiet the world almost missed it. He went back to Mayberry. Not literally, but spiritually. He took a train, not a private jet, across the country. Alone, with a single backpack, he stopped in small towns. Visited diners, talked to strangers. Not as Ron Howard the director, but as Ron Howard, the man who was finally breathing a little easier. Along the way, he kept a notebook, not a script, not a pitch. Just memories, thoughts, lines, that had waited 50 years for him to have time to hear them. One night, in a tiny motel outside Santa Fe, he wrote a sentence that would become the thesis of the documentary's epilogue. You can spend a lifetime creating stories for the world, and only discover at the end that your real story was the one you were living quietly. While no one watched when he returned to Los Angeles, the director of the documentary asked if they could add a final chapter. Just a short sequence showing where Ron had gone. But Ron said no. That journey was mine, he explained. For once, I don't want a camera between me and my own life. Still, the director found a way to honor it, without filming a single mile. The epilogue begins with a close-up of Ron's notebook, his handwriting, raw and unpolished. The narrator reads his words, slowly, gently. I'm still learning how to be present, still learning how to forgive myself, still learning that perfection was never the goal, only connection. Then, the screen fades into simple black text, asterisk, asterisk, Ron HOW, survivor, father, husband, finally telling the one story he never knew how to share, his own. Asterisk, asterisk, the music swells, not triumphant, but warm, the kind of score that makes you breathe differently, softer, deeper, and with that, the documentary ends. No scandal, no twist, just truth, a truth 50 years in the making.